none of us think we need to worry about how our data is used until our data is used against us.
Yeah.
But at that point, it's too late because actually you're now the victim of misuse of your data.
When we think about data and data protection, what are the key things that either concern you or the key kind of things we should be aware of?
Right. So, concern me. Shall we set in for the? Shall we get our sleeping bags and lay down?
Why should we care about privacy? Because so many of us don't anymore.
Because it won't stop.
If we use the digital tools that we're using every day, can we have any level of privacy, in your opinion? Welcome to Digital Health Diagnosed, your dose of tech wellbeing, hosted by me, Dr. Rachael Kent, lecturer in digital economy and society at King's College London and founder of Dr. Digital Health. This podcast is the very first evidence-based podcast which helps diagnose how technology impacts your health and everyday life. Today, we're going to be talking about personal data, apps and privacy. I'm thrilled to be joined by James Walker, who is a consumer rights activist, expert in this space, has worked extensively for Rightly, helping consumers understand how they can protect their data, is also a board member for Consumer Scotland, the Dispute Resolution Ombudsman, and is on the consumer panels for the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, as well as the Civil Justice Council. There's a lot of stuff going on there, James.
I know.
Quite a lot of that. It's a really mouthful.
Yeah.
Mouth-filled intro.
Try doing the intro when you get on a phone call. You just end up going, I do a load of bits.
You do loads of important stuff and you work for lots of important organisations. So thank you so much, James. For
Always a
being
pleasure, never a chore.
So we're going to be talking today about apps and privacy and the ways in which consumers can protect their data or maybe have a greater understanding of what's happening with their data, which, as I mentioned, is definitely your area of expertise. So can we just kick off with understanding for the everyday person, for the listeners, how are the main kind of monetization processes that exist of how tech companies or apps make money with our data?
It's really, of course we can. And it is really interesting because, look, the first bit is, if you look at your data, it's almost worthless in one sense. You know, if you were to go into the street and sell your data, how much are you going to get for it? 10p, maybe 5p.
I've never thought about just going into the street.
Yeah.
Do you want my data?
Yeah, do you want my data?
Sure.
Here's a box of data. Would you like it? And maybe you could organise it for me as well.
Yeah, that'll be handy.
But when you aggregate it together, you suddenly get a lot of potential opportunities. And that's a lot of what's occurring. And I know we're talking about apps, but let's just think apps and websites, anything that's digital based. Mm-hmm. The other part of it, though, is that as well as being able to look at where your data is or how your data could be used, they've got to think about how that they monetize. Mm-hmm. So you can have different layers of services. I remember like 10 years ago, if you were to go out and try and raise money, you'd go, oh, I've got this really good idea. And no one would go, well, how do you make money? They'd go, yeah, go on, build
just
it.
Follow the idea.
Yeah, follow the idea and then work out how you're going to make money. Mm-hmm. Suddenly what's happened over about the last 3 or 4 years, probably more since COVID, there's been well, how the hell do you make money? And there's been a movement of all of those businesses that managed to survive going, well, where do we make money from? Mm-hmm. And the new businesses coming along within the space are going, okay, we've got to have a proper revenue plan.
Okay.
Now, that can be from a few different sources. One is you're seeing a lot more things are trying to make you pay for them. And that's from traditional media, signing up. And the reason being is that things like that, ad revenues are dying.
Well, newspapers aren't making any money, print newspapers anymore.
Yeah. But even digital online is hard because all of the ads that you used to see, or you still see, they're getting a lot less money for them. A lot less people are interested. I mean, I was leaving the house the other day. I know this is irrelevant, but I think it's interesting. I was leaving the house the other day, and I think it's Trisha was on the TV, God forbid, and the adverts between Good Morning Britain and Trisha. I don't even know if it's called Good Morning Britain any longer. I just know. Whatever ITV's program. Was the adverts I saw were for dog food from someone's called, I think it was Butternut Dog Food.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. And some sort of old age home, I think it was. And I was going, this is prime time, daytime TV, and you've got ads that won't even sustain a TV channel being played. Now,
that's really bizarre.
Yeah. You take that and then you reverse this back down into an app that's a startup that's trying to go, I want you to spend £10 a month. and you're going to go, oh, I already spend 80 quid or 90 quid or
Yeah.
whatever it may be on all of these subscriptions I've got. You go, I'm not going to pay for another one. They've got to think how they're going to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So you've either got people looking at alternative ways of making money, or they're looking at opportunities to get more money. And your data can become a very interesting area from, okay, how do I upsell opportunities into you based on what I see where you buy or where you go or your habits? Can I actually convert that into a revenue opportunity? Or alternatively, can I even sell your data on from what I learn? Now, there's lots of people out there that have access to your data. I did my own digital data footprint, and I got bored at about 4,500 companies. You know, I went, if I carry this on, I could.
How long did it take to get to 4,500?
About 3 months. But one of the things I found,
that is commitment.
I know, yeah. But I found an organisation out there that called an organisation type called Data Brokers, and one of these data brokers had 4 pages of information on me, and one of the pieces of information was my propensity to get cancer. And I'm thinking, where did that come from? Who uses that, and how do they use that?
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, like that's, I think, okay, we're going off piste already, but let's just do it. That I think that relates to what we had the Ada Lovelace Institute, Anna Studman, senior researcher, on in earlier episodes, and she was talking about digital phenotyping, which is basically where non-health related data gets aggregated and obviously grabbed from everything that you're engaging with, like any digital trail effectively, and then is used to profile your health risks or the potential for health risks.
Right, okay.
So that might be, I'm just, that might be completely wrong, but that might be what's happening there, which is fascinating.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
And the point is with it is that, look, there is a set of data that either gets used to work out how to be able to best target you or can be used to sell on to someone else. And at this point, your data then starts to have a value, because if I could get 100,000 people to download my app and to use it, and I've got data about you and your preferences, and, you know, I'm sure you've talked about it on other episodes, from sexual health to frequencies of purchase of whatever it may be, that becomes very targetable.
Yeah.
And actually, advertisers are really focused on who do I get to and the right time to get to them now more and more. And the other
increasing personalization.
I
think that we live within, and this is something that I teach. We talked about on the module, and I on the module. I keep saying module today. Talked about on the podcast, and I teach about at King's. But it's this increased personalized ecosystem that we live within, and I think it's just very fascinating how that just seems to get more and more targeted. As time goes on.
And here's one, and I'm probably going to go a little bit off piste here now as well. But I've thought long and hard about this, and I think that there is an element that exists that we don't see or we don't ever think about, which is when we create a tech business, they've all got these fantastic growth curves, and they all want to maintain these fantastic growth curves. And that, whether it's something that's a month old or whether it's something that's 20 years old, you know, Facebook buying WhatsApp or whatever, and Instagram, etc., is everyone's on this, I've got to keep this curve going up. Is there's no point where somebody goes, actually, I've reached the full saturation for my market, I'm not going to be able to grow it anymore. So because we have to keep going, we're having to try and find ways to be able to either create new audiences, new revenues, because you can't turn around to the investors and go, actually, you know what, I think we're going to pretty flatline here because we're about as good as we're going to get. You go, well,
it's not very business-minded.
Yeah. Well, I've got to go and try and find another way to be able to bring in more revenue. And the danger with that is that what you end up doing is going a little bit more left field each time on what's acceptable about how that you can make money.
Okay.
And suddenly you can end up in a situation where, you know what, a business that started out with a very ethical purpose now doesn't seem to have a very ethical purpose.
Yeah, I think we see that across the board. And there's some specific examples that we can talk about, and we have talked about in other episodes as well. Can you just come back to the point you're making about COVID? What's the kind of correlation with COVID and the increasing monetization of our data? And is that because of the And again, this is not my kind of area of expertise, but is that because of increasingly stuff moving online, the fact that we're not in the high street as much, and we're kind of living our lives through the screen increasingly, multiple apps for multiple things in our lives every day? Is that why, or what's going on there?
So there's a foundation which is a little bit more boring.
Okay.
Which was when you see a downturn in the market, and we're seeing it now with interest rates going up. In COVID times, investors went, holy cow, there's a major issue here. What the fuck are we going to do? We're going to stop investing in new things. We're going to make sure the things we've invested don't go bust. So you saw the investment risk profile suddenly become, we want low risk or no risk.
Okay.
So suddenly businesses needed to work out very quickly how to be able to make money. Up until that point, they may have been in a cycle where the investors were going, yeah, keep going. All I want to see is growth. Suddenly the investors turned around and went, well, how are you making money? I want money and I want it now because I'm not going to be able to support you because the world's about to implode.
So
Panic.
a case of fear. Largely as well.
And we've seen it again when interest rates have gone up. The impact has been is that investors have gone, well, actually, you know what? I can make good money in the bank now. Before I was making, sod all. Now I've got that 4.5%, that 5% interest potentially. Well, I don't need to go and invest in high risk. I could go and put it in some sort of bond or derivative or whatever it may be and get some decent returns. So your foundation of investment starts drying up. Businesses therefore need to think quicker about how that they make money or convert how that they were making money. Now, the fact that we're more online, yeah, absolutely. That's not going to harm in exactly what you're saying about being able to go, right, more people are on this. Can we make more money from them? Yes, of course we can.
Yeah. Basic kind of economics. So specifically then, what role does our personal data play in the monetization process? Obviously, you've kind of touched on a few things, but can we kind of dig into some specifics of the value of it? Because you hear now the data is the new oil rhetoric thrown around for widely. And I think we increasingly understand that we are the product if we're using stuff for free. I think it wasn't too long ago where that was maybe not understood on that kind of wider scale. I think now most people that are using kind of the digital world would kind of start to see the trade-off of privacy being because of personal data being monetized. But exactly what's happening? Like, how do we understand that?
So the simple way I think to think about this is every piece of information about you has a separate value. When you put as many pieces together, it suddenly has a combined value. This is where 1 + 1 starts equaling 3 or 5. Is what you're seeing is classically people being asked for more information than they probably need to give.
Yeah.
And as part of that is that there is a profiling. So, we talk a lot now about large language models, but we like to call it the word AI because AI sounds more threatening.
Yeah.
But, a large language model is not really that intelligent. The same is happening with our data, is that this is about building up cohorts of data and profiles of data. I mean, I looked at a company up in Manchester a couple of years ago that basically said, if you can give me access to your app and location data, we will work out where someone lives, where they go shopping, i.e. which supermarkets, which shops that they go to, where they work, what days that they work there, and what their travel journey is. And out of the back of that, we can then be able to work out what could be targeted to them. And that's not asking for a lot of data. That's the background refresh. Where are you?
Right. Okay.
And even from that to the point of being able to go, okay, I now know your postcode. Well, if I know your postcode and I've got your name, I can now go and work out from the records. I can't think of the word now, but polling records data. I can go and work out that. From that, I can then go to a data broker. I could go and build up a very extensive profile on you very quickly from just being able to track where you move.
And that's the data that we might not even be aware of, say, that kind of like kind of imagined surveillance, or the one that's we're not necessarily consenting to a lot of that, or maybe we're unaware we're consenting.
We'd given consent because Apple, don't mean to interrupt, but Apple is quite focused on making sure that we understand how the tracking is occurring.
Yes, trying to.
Yeah.
They weren't not that long ago.
Yeah. It's like, whatever, carry on.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. It's an important point to raise. But I think also thinking about the data that we are very aware of and that we voluntarily give up. And I think when speaking to the point that you were saying about when we do sign up and the T's and C's and whatever, I have noticed how I'm giving away more and more stuff. And they always want to know more and more. And over the years, like it used to be just a couple of things, just your name and email, and now it's your date of birth and it's like X, Y, Z. And is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about that, yeah. And, sometimes is that what you're giving as well, to be fair, is not being driven by the organisation going, let's ask for all of that data. There's more and more need to do KYC. Which is a great term that everyone will now have to go and try and guess what it is, or go and Google
KYC.
it. Yeah. I suppose I'm going to have to give in and tell everyone, know your customer.
Oh, right. Okay.
And then a second set, which is AML, which sounds like it should be some sort of radio channel, but it's anti-money laundering.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing is that
it's a verification process.
Yeah, verification processes that take more data in about you. That's why sometimes you'll see things like liveness checks as well.
Yes.
That's actually going to be KYC and AML.
Yeah.
So that's making sure that you're a legitimate person.
You are who you say you are. Thing. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'm not going to sit here and say that every data...
It's all sinister.
Because it's not.
No. I think, and it's important to highlight that is there to essentially protect you to a certain degree, because that's making sure that you are who you say you are rather than a robot or whatever.
Exactly.
So I guess today then, what do you think are the key issues that are facing consumers when we think about data and data protection? What are the key things that either concern you or the key kind of things we should be aware of? Right.
So concern me. Shall we set in for the? Shall we get our sleeping bags and lay down? This could go on for a fair few hours.
Yeah.
But look, I think the first thing is we are all oblivious about how our data is used, and in many respects, I think we should be, because we shouldn't need to worry. But at the same time, what's being done with it, you should worry about, because you'd actually probably be quite surprised if you knew or learned about actually how your data is being used. So that's the first bit.
Okay.
The second bit is that we are naive as well. And I can go into any of these in more detail, but I think we're naive on how we think our data is being used.
Okay, yeah, can you expand on that?
Yeah. So I'll give you, one classic example to me is that, your inbox is full of those really annoying marketing emails that you click on the unsubscribe.
Yes.
Yeah, you've unsubscribed from unsubscribed from receiving that email. You haven't unsubscribed from your data being held by that company.
Yes.
So, your data is still there and being held by them. Now they're just not marketing to you. So fundamentally...
Then you forget about it.
Yeah. You've left a footprint of risk out there.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah. Because everyone that has your data has a potential to lose it. So you're sitting there with your data in multiple places that you don't know even where it is.
Yeah.
The third one is that we don't see a value from our data, and we don't see how to be able to use our data. And I think we should. And I really believe that we should. And one of the fundamentals I have as an issue about this, one is organizations that make you very easy for you to sign up to them, but make it very hard for you to get your information or to find out what information they've got. Why is that I can sign up for something and you only need 3 or 4 pieces of information? But when I say, can you tell me what information you've got on me? Well, please send me a copy of your driving license, and I'd like to have this, and this in order to send it back.
Yeah.
Well, you're quite happy to take it when you knew you could make money out of me.
Power asymmetry, massively.
Yeah. That's so wrong. And part of that as well is that I think that there is no clever or intelligent way at the moment being able to deal with digital signatures. And what I mean by that,
what do you mean?
What I mean by that is that if I went and asked my insurer for a copy of my data, the only way that I can sort of prove that it's me is probably they're going to ask me for a copy of a bill. A bill that I don't actually get any longer.
My digital bill. I have no idea where it is.
No idea where it is. And I've got to go and find the login now for my energy account.
And good luck with that.
And I've got to send you a copy of my passport, my driving license. Well, why can't I prove who I am by almost a government digital standard to say, I've got a token that verifies this is me. There was a movie in, I
You
think
mean like a digital ID card? Sorry.
yeah, similar, but almost to the point of just being able to have a token that I've proved that who I am, stored on my device, that therefore it's me, that I've been through that I can share you the token, and therefore be able to say that this is me.
Okay.
Why do I need to go through this painful process of proving who I am?
And I guess that wouldn't have to be attached to any other data in terms of the surveillance aspects of
Exactly.
it. So it could be, because I guess anything that's kind of like rolled out en masse, that's a kind of identifier. I'm always like, the red flags of surveillance, but it could be very personalised and used for one purpose and one purpose only, potentially.
Yeah.
My worry is that it might get weaponised for something else. But yeah.
But actually, you know what? Actually, I think about these things randomly. About 3 o'clock.
No way. I'm aware of the way your brain works, James.
There is not a single thing that's ever been rolled out that wasn't a good idea that turned out to be a bad idea. But the question is how that you deal with making it a good idea and preventing the bad in the right way. So, I remember back in the days when I worked for Kingfisher, you went to any workshop and it would be about the market being revolutionized by Airbnb changing the way in which we live because now you don't need a hotel room. No one at the time went where it could turn entire parts of cities into ghettos because no one would be able to live there because everyone wants to rent something out.
Very good point.
That was never, we only saw the great side of what this could be, not the problem that it could potentially cause.
I think it's like Facebook, even going back to, another kind of earlier example of thinking this is about social networking. Rather than about, and maybe even Facebook in the early stages, if we can give them that much credit, not recognizing the value of it on what it would grow into in terms of data capturing and then monetizing, profiling. But it's I agree. I think it's often things start off with that very potentially utopian approach that then leads somewhere else.
And then it leads somewhere else. And, whether this be that actually the way that data's used. I mean, Tim Berners-Lee has a company he's got called Inrupt. And their focus is the concept that you have all your data in a pod that you own and you allow businesses access to that pod with your permission. Now, the government's talked about the concept of pod owners being organizations that you trust, whether it be your church, whether it be a consumer association like Which that could do it, for example, and have, many of them out there that become the sort of holders or the curators of your data. And I think they're clever ideas, but the problem is how you move from a mechanism where we hand over data to giving permission to use my data. You need something that's a significant shift to allow that to occur. Now, in the meantime, because I think that's going to be very hard to do, is how do you get to a point where you can use your data? And I think this is where there is a great opportunity, which is fundamentally between the data sources that you already have. Let's say, for example, your inbox. Your inbox will curate most of the information about your life, fundamentally. What if you could actually organize that data out from your inbox that you could use to complete tasks for you? So I don't know. Let's say a mortgage application. You're going to do a mortgage application.
Painful process.
How much information are they going to ask you? How many jobs, pay slips, where's your wages?
That's a surveillance process.
And actually, if you thought about it, if you had a really intelligent way that your data had been organized, most of your data you have somewhere. It's a bit like, there was a Morecambe and Wise sketch where he played the piano and he played the notes and he didn't make any sense. It wasn't a song. And somebody comes over to him and went, I'm playing all the right notes, not necessarily in the right order. And it's a bit like that with your data. You've got all the data's there, but it's not in a structured order that you can use.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And when you were saying about the pod as well, it made me think about just kind of more archaic kind of ways of surveilling populations and the census. And, we used to have all this information held about us by the church or by our hospitals or clinicians or GP. And we were okay with that because it was within the confines of a data protected space. Like even, going back to kind of, centuries ago, that's how data about populations was held. But then I guess it's that en masse and the using or the repurposing of that data for the purpose in which it wasn't collected, which I think is something that, and especially in the health space, that I'm very concerned about.
Yeah.
And COVID contact tracing data is something that I'm like, where has that data gone? Like, who's got it? Like, what are they going to do with that? Like, I find it quite fascinating. And nobody knows, I don't think, yet what's going to happen with it. But I think we can speculate about horrible things.
The problem is as an individual, the power that you have over your data is negligible. Personally, I don't think the ICO and the way that it does a lot of this stuff is fit for purpose.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that where they care about, there are certain areas that they will care about health data more than others. But fundamentally, what you've got is a regulator trying to regulate and enforce a market. That's never really worked very well. If you look at all of the other markets, let's take energy or telecoms, you have a regulator that has regulation and you have an ombudsman, which is a mechanism of enforcement.
Yeah.
And that enforcement costs the companies money. So every time a case goes to the ombudsman, it's probably between £300 and £700, depending on the market. Every time a case goes to the ICO, it does not cost an organisation anything.
Yeah.
The number of cases the ICO can deal with are minimal. If an organisation then disputes, it needs to go through, I think it's called the first tier or the common tribunal. When I last looked at it, it was taking about 9 or 12 months for a tribunal hearing to come about.
Wow.
The money that comes out from any fine actually goes to the Treasury and doesn't go to the ICO.
Gosh.
So you've got an
It's about as long as my court case.
Yeah.
It takes us a lot. Yeah.
We'll still be talking about that in a few years' time. But you're in a scenario that the regulator, as the problem grows, does not get more money to be able to solve the problem with.
Yeah.
You've got a market that is not being incentivized to do this properly, because if they get fined, the only people that really get fined are the ones that totally and utterly drop a bollock. They are the ones that decide to text message 1 million people that didn't give permission. Oh, you're really bad. We're
very
fine you.
visible.
Yeah.
Ups, basically. Yeah.
The smaller ones, no one sees.
Yeah.
They don't do anything with.
I mean, this feels like a very difficult question, but I just love your take on it. If we use the digital tools that we're using every day, can we have any level of privacy, in your opinion?
This is proper go and live in the woods moment, isn't it?
Into the wild.
Yeah. Let's go and find where I buried the food in case there's a tsunami. It is very hard. I mean, if you do VPN tracking, if you mask your email, if you put a new email address, if you change your name, if you change your date of birth, if you're taking something that doesn't need payment because it will check all of that information, you can sort of create an anonymous situation, I think, for yourself.
But that takes a huge amount of technical literacy.
And
money. And,
who's going to do it?
Socioeconomic kind of divide in that as well, isn't there?
I would actually be more worried, rather than the ability for your data to prevent the data on the input. I would go with the other way of doing it, is making your data worthless, and therefore there's no value in your data. And that's going the other way around. So there are about 30 nodes in the data world called data brokers. These are the people that are trying to aggregate as much information on you as possible, and then sell it on to others. Is you go to those 30 organizations and you say, do not process my data. Because now they can't sell your data. So therefore your data does not go wild, does not go feral and run free. And you don't know where it's gone. You know,
the Wild West. Of your data.
Stop that by actually stopping the nodes where it can escape from.
But I think this goes to your point of people not knowing.
No.
Like the everyday person wouldn't know that that is an option, or that's a process that you could do.
Yeah.
I think that in and of itself is problematic.
Yep. And, if we take this back 1 second, this is where you go, actually, you become the most boring person at the dinner party that everyone actually then ends up wanting to ask you a question about, going back to Resolver days. And I remember one of the first things I learnt about was guaranteed service standards, that if your electricity's cut off, you can get £20. So when for like 24 hours. So when somebody tells you, electricity, it's guaranteed service standard. And you just go, actually, I'm so dull. But it's more the fact that there are so many little pieces of information out there that fundamentally we don't know about, whether that be about your consumer rights, or whether that be about your data, or whether that be the intersect of where those two come together. Fundamentally, if you don't know, then you don't know, A, how to solve it, but B, I'd say you're probably oblivious to it. And maybe it's all right to be oblivious. This is the red pill, blue pill from the Matrix moment, isn't it? Do I want to know about what's happening to my information? Well, actually, probably 8 times out of 10, it doesn't really matter, because whilst it's out there, it's not making any risk to you. But the 2 out of 10 where you're going, would I really want someone to know that about me? Would I really want somebody to make money out of me when I don't have a choice on it?
Yeah.
Do I really want that data to be combined together? And, so many people must have done that moment where they've talked about something like, we should get some new garden furniture. And then amazingly, all the ads that they see on Facebook are about garden furniture or something. How did that happen?
Yeah, I think... Yeah, can we just touch on, this is more of a philosophical question. Why do you think we should care about privacy? Because I think I agree with you, and with my students, they largely don't care about privacy because they see the trade-off as the using all these products and services largely for free, and that's worth it. And the personalization is worth it because of the targeted ads and the recommendation algorithms and all that stuff. And I want to come on to talk about tech design in just a moment. But before we do, why should we care about privacy? Because so many of us don't anymore.
Because it won't stop. There is no point at which there is an acceptable how your data is used. The question is how unacceptably your data is going to be used. And what I mean by that is that there's no point where your data gets shared and somebody goes, no, stop, you can't do that. Once it's shared, it can be used however. So if somebody can find that from a very simple thing like being able to target you with something that you actually find offensive or rude, to a point of where actually you've been profiled in the wrong way, and the impact that can have on you. And I'll tell you something about that I had on that the other day. Well, not quite on that, but I think it's an example. And then the third one is that where this data actually can then be used against you, whether that be scams or whether that be fraud. And that's where I'm going to go quickly is. I, last Friday, on a Zoom call, sitting there, as you do, looking at my phone, thought, I'll look at my bank balance, boom, boom, boom. Couldn't get my banking app. So I phone up the bank afterwards and go, I can't get the banking app. And they asked me 3 questions. 1, what's your address? Okay, pretty good at that one. 2, what's your national insurance number? At which point I'm going, how do you know my national insurance number? And I'm giving it 1 point. I'm thinking, why do they want that? 3, what was the last credit paid into your account and how much was it for? To which my comedy moment went, well, if I could access my banking app, I could tell you, which they did not find funny, but I thought I was a comedian at that point. They went, we've locked your account. It's under review for 10 days. You can't take out any money. Your cash card doesn't work. Your banking apps don't work.
Because you made a joke.
They didn't like it. Yeah. If you get 0, you're out. And they said, we've got 10 days to review your account, but you've got no access to money. We'll pay you direct debits, but basically that's it.
Really helpful.
Really helpful. They won't tell me why. They will never tell me why. I think I've worked out why as well. But this is speculation. But the point is that is an algorithm using my data to be able to decide my risk profile, and it's taken action against me because of the use of my data. Now, suddenly, I, who have never thought I should have a second backup bank account with some prepper money in case I need to escape to the country, are now going, should I actually have a second bank account in which I've put £500 in or something, just in case this shitting situation ever happens again.
Yeah, to protect yourself
Yeah,
from an algorithm that's made a decision about you.
It's made a decision about me.
Decision
was
unwarranted.
Yeah. None of us think we need to worry about how our data is used until our data is used against us.
Yeah.
But at that point, it's too late, because actually you're now the victim of misuse of your data.
That's a very good line.
Boom. Right, we'll have to end it there.
Did you write that?
Yeah. Luckily, we're recording it, I suppose.
Very, very nice. Okay, tech design. How are apps made to be engaging and to capture our attention? And I know that this obviously comes to a lot of the businesses that you've worked in as developing apps, many for very ethical purposes. But maybe if we can kind of zoom out onto just generally app design and the kind of monetization process.
Yeah. So let's do them as two bits. How do you make an app engaging? This is like there's something called user experience. They call it UX.
Yeah.
UX is all about how do you make something first easy for you to use and then making you want to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to break this down into a couple of bits. First one is, if anyone ever gets bored, there's a book, and it's probably about 15 years old now, which is called Don't Make Me Think, by a guy called Steve Krug.
Yeah.
And I think it's possibly one of the best books. If you go back to, previous guests talking about human psychology and behavior, I think you've had on.
Yes.
This is all about human behavior and psychology of what we expect. So, for example, if you went on a website, you'd expect the basket to be on the right, not the left. You wouldn't look on the left. You expect the menu to be at the top, not the bottom. Because we've been trained in where we think things should be.
Yeah.
That there is an entire psychology of how we engage with apps. And this is all of the user experience is about. I personally find it fascinating.
Yeah,
because,
I really find
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also kind of related to choice architecture.
Yeah.
The way in which we're kind of pushed towards certain choices. We've talked about that on the podcast so far. I just find it fascinating.
Yeah. I can choose colours, and I know that colours will make different differences to you, for example.
Different affective responses.
Yeah. So what you'll notice is startup banks can often start with very garish and loud colours. They're very likely they'll end up with blues and blacks.
Yeah.
Because it's a trust colour.
Trusty and reliable.
Yeah. So whilst they want to stand out from the crowd, they then go, we need to look like the crowd.
Yeah. Once we've gained our crowd.
Yeah. Now we've got to go safe and stable.
Yeah.
So, from where buttons are, for example. But the way that really good engagement works is about give and take, or trying to create an incentive for you to do something. So, I've noticed that Temu, the sort of let's try and compete with Amazon by...
Oh my God, it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah, literally.
But I spoke to them at one point, and they were willing to give... What was it? It was about £5 or £10 per lead. That's high. That's really
massive.
That's really high. What I'm hearing there is I'm hearing somebody that actually is more interested in acquiring than making money.
Yeah.
Because they've got, their thing is about market acquisition. Mm-hmm. And that's always interesting, is where somebody is in the cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But they had something on there which was a click here, spin the wheel, see what you're going to get. 20% discount, £10 free. They're creating something to engage you. Yeah. They're giving you something.
Gamification.
You've won. Oh my God, amazing! But I've got to go and use it in Temu.
I'm going to spend it on your site.
Yeah. I'm going to go and buy, in my case, a cardboard ice cream holder that looks like an ice cream van. Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. It was exciting at the time.
Did you buy it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. What am I going to do with that? I'm going to build it. That's what I'm going to do. Luckily, it wasn't life size. That would have been a bit hard. But the bit with it is that what you're doing is you're finding ways to engage, and you optimize wording. You optimize. If I go and look at any fintech app now, what you're going to see is on the website, and I'm going to do this in desktop mode for simplicity.
Yeah.
So desktop being as your desktop, mobile being as your mobile, just in case everyone understands.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually pretty obvious as well, isn't it? Yeah, now I've said it. But if I hadn't said it, there's probably one person out there.
I like the clarification. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah, one person out there be going, well, what's he talking about? Is you'll have an image of the product on the right. On the left, you'll have about 25 words, which will explain the benefit of what you're going to get here. You'll have a call to action button beneath it. Beneath that will be a banner, which either to begin with, if an organisation is small, will be the media outlets that they've been mentioned in. Then it will be Trustpilot once they've got enough Trustpilot reviews. And then it will probably be user feedback once they're big enough and going, we don't need Trustpilot.
Nice. Yeah.
Below that is then the benefits. Below that is how it works. Below that is another section, which is trust. And below that will be actually the footer.
Yeah.
And that's because everyone's worked out this is the best way to convert
That's
you.
the kind of visual formula or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
It's funny, as you were running through it, I could just see it all in my head. Like it was just already imprinted, right? That's what I expect to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I go back to my Steve Scruggs thing. You're looking at this. So what I've got to do is I've got to work out who my target audience is, how I get them there, and what do I need to do to make you convert.
Yeah.
Now, on the Resolver days, that was actually quite easy in one respect because it was about people with complaints.
Yeah.
And therefore what you do...
Call to action's pretty clear.
Yeah.
I'm pissed off. This is not okay.
Act now.
Action.
Yeah. We'll help you. But, it was about getting in the right people. It wasn't about going out and just going, I want to collect anyone in the universe. It was going, we built pages which were Vodafone complaint, O2 complaint, Virgin Media complaint.
Yeah.
And therefore it was targeted towards the issue that you had that you're trying to resolve.
And all templated.
All templated. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So if you're talking about design, something like that was very sensible or very easy design because you knew what you were designing for.
And Resolver did do that very well.
Yeah. If you've got a product which isn't about solving a problem, but is about trying to make your life better, that's where it becomes harder.
Yeah.
And that's where organizations will look at how that they can acquire.
Yeah.
And often, not often, I hate the word often because it implies everyone does it, but this is where you can get into scenarios where they will want to try and get data from somebody else that's a similar audience. How do I get the data and how do I market? And it may be in the other place that you see them. It may be about them separately. But also, it doesn't necessarily also need to be design. Just flipping off for a second. There are places in the UK where there are organisations that are committing scams by phoning up and trying to sell you insurance policies. Local trading standards will try and close them down. But they know if they close them down, the next week they'll start back up in the same building with a different company name with the same people running it.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is that we have a list. You can buy in lists of people, and you have on that list people who are vulnerable, who it should, do not contact. Guess what? If you're a scammer, the do not contact numbers are the ones that you phone first because they're the most people that are most likely to convert. And then what you do is you create a suckers list.
Yeah.
And then you sell that suckers list onto other organizations that want to try and sell dodgy stuff to people. So let's say a really good example is that I set up a company trying to, I know I'm going slightly off piece, but
go for it.
Yeah. But I set up a company that's going to sell you dodgy PV panels and I'm never going to install them. And I take a £7,500 deposit off you. And I managed to do this to 100,000 people. Before anyone realizes that I'm not doing a good job. Well, actually, I've just made a lot of money and I fold the business. And what I do is I sell to someone else the suckers list of everyone that bought the panel. And the suckers are then phoned up to be able to say, hey, and I'm not suggesting they are suckers, but
that's how they're perceived.
Yeah, that's how they're perceived.
Yeah.
They'll be phoned up to be said, I'm from a legal firm. We can get your £7,500 back. We're taking an action against government to be able to recover the money. But what I need off you is £500 to do this. Now, if you've lost £7,500,
it's probably worth it.
You're thinking this is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Well, that firm's never going to do it. It's just another way to get another £500 out of you. That is almost a user experience of scamming.
Yeah.
Now, if you think I'm building an app, I've got to think, how do I most encourage you to sign up? And how do I most encourage you to hand over data? And there's a two-way flow. So what often you see is that you'll put in some information and you'll get something back and then you'll be asked for some more information. That's more the way that it's working. So I don't know, let's say, for example, I sign you up to a service, you get in, and then I go, actually, to use the service now, You can see what the service is. I explain it to you, but for you to use it, I now need a lot more information.
Yeah.
That's where we're heading towards. So
pulled into getting more and more and more.
Yeah, so you don't think about it as much because it's happening in piecemeal. It's not. It's not one big set of data that you're going, hang on a second, am I happy with this?
Yeah, because if you did that all in one go, you'd probably be like, nah, all right, this feels a bit dodgy to me.
Yeah, I'll break it up. Do it
in little bite-sized chunks. Can we just talk about tech addiction?
Yeah.
And I'd love your take on whether, do you think there is a tech addiction, or do you think we're all tech addicts? Do you think it exists, and the relationship between how apps are designed or platforms are designed and addictive behaviours?
So, is there addiction? I don't know, says the man that's on his phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Is tech just another form of addiction? I don't think it's an addiction on its own, first of all. The second part I would say on it is I think we've moved into a world where we want more information and we want it quicker.
Mm-hmm.
I read the other day that the average attention span's gone down from 8 seconds to 4 seconds in something like 10 years.
Yeah. It's massively dropped.
Yeah. So actually, everyone's only heard the first 4 seconds of this podcast, and the rest of it we've just been talking to ourselves. But the bit with it though is if you're in that type of scenario, then what the addiction moves towards, I think, is not necessarily tech, but it's refreshing of information within tech.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a really good way of describing it. And I think it's the feedback or the attention economy and the way in which we're just continually seeking like more and more and more. We're refreshing. And I see it with my students. And I mean, TikTok's kind of the one that's the most kind of grabbing of attention, particularly for the younger generations, I think. And it's like the fastest growing social media platform of all time.
Yeah.
And the way in which the algorithm is also based is kind of very discovery based. So it's a very quick way to get those nice kicks of dopamine. Because you can just get that constant refresh, and it's increasingly tailored to your preferences and to your interests.
And sorry, Rachel, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, look, it's two things. One, I've taken my own miniature social experiment, and I've removed every social app from my phone, apart from the only one I'm left with is LinkedIn and Sky News, and that's not even a social app. But and what I find is that I'm trying to think when I'm looking at the phone, where can I go and what's refreshed or updated since I last looked at it.
Yeah.
Now, in the Resolver days, that's quite easy because we had a count of how many complaints going through per day. So all I could do is I could spend actually refreshing that literally every 30 seconds to go, gone up by another 5. Yes. Very happy. So I think, that need to be able to get new source information where, and this may stray slightly from this, but where I do think that I actually have concern is our need for an algorithm to find the right information to show us, I think has a danger of the cohesion of society, and that may sound big. And I totally, I think it was very well said, and I completely agree. And I think there are kind of seismic shifts that are happening on a societal and cultural level because of algorithmic recommendation and sorting what's made visible and what's not, and the little filter bubbles and echo chambers that we all live within, and we don't even realise that we live within it, right? And like, I think, to me, Brexit was probably one of the starkest examples of it, and Trump, and on a kind of political level. But I think every single day, whatever we're searching for is still being kind of tailored accordingly. And that, like, on the one hand, it's like the convenience and accessibility, great. On the other side, it's terrifying. Yeah. We don't know what we don't see. Yeah. And I have always grown up in this view that the world become more liberal, the world become more open. And I always believed it's the right thing to do. And I actually look at it now and I'm worried whether we're
going the other way.
Yeah, we're going the other way.
I completely, agree. I grew up in a very liberal household and I'm very liberal myself. And I think with the people I surround myself with are also very, so I've got my own echo chamber. I've got my own filter bubble socially, professionally, even from a research lens. But then you see what's happening in the world and the increasing rise towards kind of dictatory kind of ideologies or populism or it's, and the political polarization. It's just, fascinating, but terrifying.
All at the same time.
Yeah, all at the same time.
I mean, I once went and met, well, I've met a few, but my endearing memory was meeting one of the paper owners that owns a number of the news media. And I went to go and meet him wearing jeans and a shirt and a jacket. And I walked into the room, and excuse the language because I'm just going to say how the language was. I walked in and he went, "Fucking hell, Stan, hasn't he got a fucking tailor?" Because I had jeans on. And then we were followed by asking me where I used to work, and I said where I used to work, and he went, "Well, he was a fucking cunt, wasn't he?" And this is basically how the entire conversation went. I've never met somebody that swears so much, and I swear occasionally, but this person just basically just swore and swore and swore. But my endearing comment that came out was that he said, "Look, all we do is serve up people the belief that other people have the same view as them. That's what our role is. Our role is to make you feel that you're not alone and you're part of a tribe of people that believe like you." Now, the algorithm, I think, is the danger of being able to personify that concept, but into a quicker, faster, and therefore nastier output than a newspaper can do. Because a newspaper was covered or is covered by actually regulation.
Editorial control. Yeah, exactly. And you've got kind of journalistic codes of conduct and things like that, where there are things at play. I think increasingly they're becoming less objective and ethical and and like increasingly biased in some respects. That's a conversation for another episode. But yeah, the kind of wild beasts that the algorithmic kind of recommendations play in what we see and don't see. I was talking to my students about this today, about that kind of seismic shift, and how my perception of it is also around mental health. And I think the disparity or the isolation that we all felt during COVID, fine, and then the lack of socialization that we all experience, and the kind of, I guess we're all in a phase now of re-socializing and feeling a bit more comfortable seeing people face to face and working face to face. We're all kind of doing a lot of hybrid working if we are fortunate enough to do so. But because we live life so increasingly online, and because we are fed content that serves to agree with our kind of little silos, the lack of being challenged, but also the lack of the face-to-face, but also throwing in a lot of kind of negative, toxic content as well, particularly if you think about the circulation of misinformation or the atrocities we're seeing in Gaza and all of this kind of the world. I'm kind of jumping around, but this whirlwind we're living in through the digital economy, I think in large part at the moment is why we've in contribution have seen such a rise in mental health issues since COVID, or during and since COVID. You're kind of trying to lean on an algorithm to create a community, and that's not how the human psyche works.
No.
Like we need to see people, we need to be in and amongst other people, and those kind of ways of communicating don't serve us. They serve us a bit in some ways, but they don't serve us fully.
I mean, I remember the two bits, the one bit that I always, when we were in lockdown and doing meetings, I was thinking to myself, you know what, actually, I've now lost mental relaxation. And there's probably a better way to even say that because it sounds a bit crap. But what I mean is that you'd used to go from meetings, and you'd go to meetings at different locations.
Yes.
You had travel time where you could sort of think about things,
decompress,
post a meeting, think about what happened and what the next steps are, and then think, can I have a beer on the train or something? Or, oh, look, there's no seat. So, again, could I see it in that luggage rack? Do you think that luggage rack would be comfortable for the next 2 hours or not?
So you're a commuter.
Yeah. But when we went through COVID, it was like, I'll start meetings at 9 and I'm finishing at 6. And I've got literally a meeting. There's no gaps.
No, you wear multiple hats all the time simultaneously. And like I would find myself, especially with teaching, I'd start like a seminar or a lecture, and I'd be like, what module is this? Like, what am I meant to be lecturing now? And we have to go back to my calendar and then be like, oh, right, get that lecture up. And honestly, and then that would just be teaching, let alone all your other projects and stuff. For you, that's somebody that does and works in different kind of industries and sectors. Obviously, there's kind of an alignment with consumer rights overarching, but you're doing lots of different things. So I can imagine like you're constantly jumping around.
And it was nightmare. It was absolute nightmare.
And exhausting.
And it's sort of, that's when you sort of felt that you'd really done a day's work, if you know what I mean. It was like, I'm actually physically exhausted at the end of the day, as opposed to before you can walk down to Costa and go and pick up a bit of coffee. No, there isn't. It's fine, man. I've got I haven't got a gap in the diary, and there's no Costa. But
Yeah.
apart from those two minor issues,
Yeah, and I think Zoom fatigue and everything
Yeah,
came
yeah,
with that
yeah.
as well. But we are close. Well, we're nearly coming to the end of the questions. I would love to, before we finish up with your tips, talk a little bit about regulation.
Yeah.
Because this is something that I'm very passionate about, particularly in the health space. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
just generally from your perspective, what regulation do we need, or what additional regulation do we need to protect consumer data?
Well, I looked at the concept of the Digital Harms Bill about 4 years ago. And just on that, I always love a good bit of regulation because it only takes about 10 years to be able to get something through. And by the time you get it through, it's already started becoming out of date already. So, what we're talking about now started quite a while ago. And I think it could have been a lot better than that is going to be. I think that there are some changes, though, that I do look as a positive, and I haven't got onto the answer yet. This is the preamble, which is you've got the CMA looking at how they can be given more power to be able to act quickly and investigate markets. That's awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
Because it's not taking regulation to be able to go and do something.
Yeah.
But
Competition and Markets Authority.
It's Competition and Markets Authority. Yeah. The only three-letter abbreviation. I explained what desktop was, and I don't explain what CMA is. I think that's a really positive approach. Where I'm going to go back round to what we've said before is I think that, one, there should be a clearer how your data is actually going to be used. Mm-hmm. Two is I think that the industry of data brokers should be, if I had my way, I'd break it up, because if somebody can explain to me the word legitimate interest basically means that I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Fluffy as hell.
Legitimate interest, I can get hold of you for whatever reason because I can use the word legitimate interest.
Yeah, which is incredibly arbitrary.
No, just wipe it all out, get it gone. Create a need for responsibility and liability, and the liability bit is the important part. Back on organisations about how that they use data, because fundamentally at the moment I can use data and I don't really need to care. There needs to be a liability. Now, I also say that with great power comes great responsibility. Well, actually, I don't think I say it. I think Spider-Man says it, to be fair. But the bit with it, though, is that if you do change something, we need to work out what the impact is of what you change.
Rather than changing it and then figuring it out later. I think particularly we see this with the harms of AI and, in other respects. To figure the harms before you then backtrack.
And then try and work it out. Oh, God, why did we do that?
Yeah.
And there is a danger that policy from government quite often does that, because the people that come up with the policies are very clever people, but they have a lack of understanding of the issue within the market. Mm-hmm. And therefore, what they try and do is do it from a policy perspective. And then they put it out to market, and those with a vested interest try and make sure that whatever the idea is not going to work, by either blocking it, saying that they disagree with it, or saying this is why the market won't work. Now, what you've got to do is actually have a regulation that is trying to work out how to solve the problem. Accountability, responsibility, prevent underage access to wrong data, inappropriate data. Make sure that you know how your data is going to be used. Have your ability to be able to see how your data is being used, and being able to access it with the same ease that you should be able to give your data to someone.
Yeah, I think that's something we haven't discussed actually much on the podcast so far, but it's so important. That kind of transparency. And I think most of us would just go, oh, I've got no idea where I'd start with that process.
You shouldn't need to have to think. That's
exactly.
The point.
Yeah. Is there a better way we can control our data?
Well, this is where we go back to the great idea of actually having your data in a pod and you owning your data and controlling. We're not there.
No.
And I think there needs for something like that to occur. There's quite a seismic shift.
Yeah.
Probably starting from someone like government and then pushing outwards. But I don't
Be
see
a
the
bit too
government.
innovative for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
government,
yeah,
I think.
You'd have to have
Particularly the Tories.
Yeah, you'd have to have a minister for longer than 15 months.
Exactly,
to be able to work out how to do it. That would be the great way. I think that being able to understand what your data is and how to use it is where we need innovation in the market. I believe that there's great opportunities to help consumers, but actually with business propositions that are ethical and do the right thing. But I will go back to what I said before. I think so many businesses have set out with the right ethical approach and then have had to change that. So you need to have something whereby I believe there needs to be a set of standards for smart data. And what I'm calling smart data is how data is going to be used by your data, by AI, by how that it's shared.
All of it, the whole package.
The whole
rather than
package.
Just your siloed data that, kind of in and of itself doesn't necessarily have much kind of power or influence. But then when that's aggregated and accumulated, that's where the influence and power comes from.
So we should be able to have that there is actually a set of standards that, if we go and sign up to an organisation, that we know that our actually data is under a set of standards that we're happy with. Smart data standards. I don't know what you call it. That's a shit name. But the point is that if you've got something where you're going, okay, I know that this is going to be done in the right way because they've signed up to it, is that should matter and we should care. And we should be able to choose that's what we want to, who we want to use the data with or through. To do that is a lot of effort and a lot of time. But if we don't do something, then the Wild West we talk about will just become wilder.
Yeah.
And if you can't say your W's right, it will be really, really bad.
Really weird.
Yeah.
James, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
We've got one last top tip that I would love you to share with our listeners, which is just one thing that they can take away of how consumers can be careful with their data or protect their data in some way. Just one takeaway tip.
So I would say very simply, why not do something if you've got a Gmail account, get a Gmail account. And for every time you sign up for something, put your name in and then put a plus and put the website address in. So mine would be, for example, Walker JG, and I was signing up to a website, I don't know, fulhamroad.com. I would put Walker JG plus fulhamroad@gmail.com. Now, you've created a unique email address for every place that you put your data in. Now watch your inbox and go and see the next time that you get a porn email or you get a phishing email, see what the name of the email address that's been sent to, and go and work out where your data has been leaked from. Rather than just going, I get lots of spam and I don't know how they got my email. Go and work it out.
That's very clever. Yeah. Very, very clever. I love that. Yeah. I'm going to do that.
Do it.
Do you do that?
I do that.
Yeah.
And I did it when I'm doing my data footprint. And I literally had put the first one in. Within 45 minutes, I've already got some porn emails coming in.
Really?
I've got gambling
45
emails.
minutes?
45 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. This conversation's been great. And thank you so
Pleasure.
much. It's been really enlightening and just, very interesting to hear. Kind of horrifying in parts, but interesting to hear your take on, personal data and what we can do. And I love that top tip. That's amazing. So thank you so much for being here.
Good to see you.
Thank you for listening to Digital Health Diagnosed, your dose of tech wellbeing. We're here every episode to give you tips and strategies to live a better life with your digital world and technology and your privacy and data and everyday life. Please remember to like, follow and subscribe across all the usual channels. I'll see you next time.